Welcome back to another Spirit Island video. In this video, I'm going to begin talking about the Spread of Rampant Green Strategy Guide. Now, this is a guide that I had previously completed, but I'm going to go back through and talk about the aspects and also update the just update the guide in general. So, a Spread of Rampant Green. What is this spirit? So, it is going to start in the highest number wetland and one jungle without any Dahan. Put that over here. There we go. It is a moderate complex spirit, and the summary of powers is it has decent amount of offense, less control, even less fear, a lot of defense, and a good amount of utility. I think this is pretty accurate, especially when you factor in defense as being skipping builds and skipping ravages. Flipping the spirit board over, green is going to have two special rules. The first one is choke the land with green. And this says whenever invaders would ravage or build in a land with your sacred site, you may skip it by destroying one of your presence in that land. This is an incredibly powerful ability, and this is why green is so strong. Being able to destroy a single presence in your sacred site to either skip a ravage or a build. So against France, being able to skip those build actions that cause all of those explorers to upgrade, or England skipping a build action to prevent that land from possibly losing you the game, that lost condition land, or ravages, skipping a ravage against Sweden that might be doing 8 damage, or Habsburg livestock that's doing that 8 damage lost condition blight. So it's just a very flexible special rule. And then you have steady regeneration. And this says whenever you add presence via growth, you may optionally use your destroyed presence. So that'd be presence that you have already destroyed, likely from the top special rule. And then if you're blighted, it will cost you 1 energy per destroyed presence instead. And this special rule tends to not matter in most games. I think probably maybe like 10%, maybe even less, will you actually add presence back with this special rule. So looking at the growth options, you have this weird always grow. So that means you're always placing a presence. And then you have the option to place an additional presence. So you're technically a 1-2-1. And of your options, you have always place a presence in jungle wetland. And this tends to be the terrain types that green is strong against. You then have a reclaim, gain a power card, place an extra presence and get +1 card play, and finally gain a power card and gain energy. So lots of energy, extra cards, or reclaim. And I find you actually use all of them quite a lot. When I play green, I tend to gravitate towards that G3 and then that G1. But there are options, or there are certain situations where you will want to G2 here, such that you can get that extra presence and then be able to skip a land or access a land that is Sands Mountains. That is the one thing here. Because this presence is getting added to jungle wetland, you may struggle to deal with those Sands Mountain lands, and that's where that growth option comes into play. Now, it's important to point out that steady regeneration says that you can add presence only via the growth options. Okay, so if you have, you do have a card Overgrow in the Night and Gift of Proliferation. Adding presence with these cards cannot be from destroyed presence. It has to be from presence on your tracks. Looking at your tracks, you have a respectable 3-4. Now to reach 3-3, it does take quite a lot, several turns to get there, but you do have that energy option to kind of help you flex majors. Having 4 plays is very good. I mean, 4 plays is a very standard amount of plays. And you have 2 plant on top to help enable your innates easier. Looking at your special rules, you have Creepers Tear into Mortar. This is a 0 range, slow power, and it does a single point of damage to buildings. And then you may repeat it, and then you may repeat it again. There is a really cool synergy that you can with this left innate, and that is with the Badlands token. So Badlands tokens state that you can increase the damage of an action by 1. Because this says repeat power, this counts as 3 individual powers. So if I have a Badlands, let's say in this land, and let's say I have that max innate here, every time I use that left innate doing 1 point of damage, I get the extra Badlands damage that would kill a town. I can repeat it again, which means I can choose the land again, and then I can repeat it again. So it would allow me to increase the damage of this innate 3 times. Now, it's important to point out that that's very different than a spirit like Lightning here, who has a card Raging Storm, where it says 1 damage to each invader. If I play Raging Storm on d6, I would do 1 damage to each invader, and then +1 damage killing a town. So it wouldn't amplify +1 damage to all invaders only 1 time, and that's because this is a single action, and creepers count as 3 actions. Another thing is you can actually split up the damage. So sometimes you'll use that left innate, and you might have presence like this, and you might use the left innate once here, killing the town, and then you might use it twice in D3, killing that town. So that's just kind of how you can split up this innate. And then the right innate is your defensive innate. So you have your offensive and your defensive, and it's a fast sacred site targeting power. First threshold is defend 2, second threshold is defend 4, and finally the last threshold lets you remove blight. This last line of text tends to be win more. By the time you reach this level of threshold, the game is very far gone. It likely never matters. The defend 2, this is very notable because in some matchups, like Russia or Sweden, this is going to be 4 damage, and our defend 2 is not enough to defend against the 4 damage, and that could be very problematic, and that sometimes requires the player to grow in a different way. Maybe they want to get that extra plant such that they could upgrade that innate. Another thing to point out is a Town City Explorer, which is normally going to be 6 damage. Your defend 4 does not cover that 6 damage. The more and more I play Spirit Island, the more and more I think defend 2 and defend 4 are actually the right numbers for most defensive spirits. And I think the devs caught on to that with the Many Minds development as well as Eyes Watch, where those early tiers, defend 2 and defend 4, tends to just be very fair. But like some of the older spirits, like Memory has defend 3. I mean, I guess with Memory it's kind of fine, right? Because Memory's so clunky. But like Starlight having a crazy defend 5 on your innate is just nuts. Like with Roots, they figured that out too. At one point, Roots' defend card used to be defend 2 or defend 3 per presence, and now it's defend 2. So, and I believe Earthquake is defend 1 per impend. I guess it maxes at 3, but at one point this was just a flat defend 3. There's just been a lot of just overall defend nerfs, and I think they've learned. Oh, I think green is a good example of when the defend 2 and 4 actually felt pretty reasonable. Now, I'm not going to get caught up too much into talking about power cards in this video, but there is one thing to point out, and that is Gift of Proliferation. This card is why green is seen as being one of the best spirits in the entire game. And the card reads, 1 energy, fast power, moon plant, target another spirit. Target spirit adds 1 presence up to 1 range from their presence. We call this a proliferation effect, and that allows another spirit to accelerate along their tracks. So Stone, for example, turn 1, Stone places a presence. Turn 2, Stone places another presence, and that's when Gift of Proliferation gets played. Proliferating Stone. Turn 3, Stone plays another presence. And because of that 1 Gift of Proliferation, Stone has now accessed an extra card play on a turn where Stone shouldn't have that extra card play. Basically, the proliferation effect is going to be, or it's going to give spirits a ton of extra value. And this card is busted. In solo, because it is another effect, you can choose yourself, and that is going to be very important to accessing those sands, mountain, land types, because remember, your always grow is only jungle wetlands. One of the mistakes I see players make all the time, and I make this mistake too, is this right innate. It is a sacred site defend or sacred site range 1. And a lot of times I think it's 2. So it's a mistake I make, so be wary of that. In addition, your stem the flow is also sacred site 1 range. So players tend to make that mistake. There's a lot of sacred site usage with this spirit because you have 2 powers that need sacred sites, and you have a special rule that needs a sacred site. So you're kind of pulled into multiple directions, and then you also have this 0 range innate. Well, okay, so let's look at the aspects. Let me swap this over to here. Okay, so green has 2 aspects. The first one is called Regrowth. And Regrowth is going to do 2 things. First, it's going to replace your second special rule. And that is going to be the ability to bring back Destroyed Presence. The second thing is it's going to give you a bag of 13 extra Destroyed Presence. That is pretty wild. It also replaces the right innate. And that right innate is your defensive innate, and it gives you an ability that allows you to add more Destroyed Presence. It says it must target a jungle wetland. It is a slow power, 1 range. If you have the first threshold, it may target any terrain. Second threshold adds a Destroyed Presence. Third adds a Destroyed Presence. And finally, the fourth threshold lets you add a Destroyed Presence to an adjacent land. So, real quick, it's important to point out base green has this fast power innate defensive tool, and it's going to combo that with Dahan movement to get those counterattacks. When you play Regrowth, you're losing a fast innate and you're gaining a slow innate. It actually plays very differently than base green. And that slow innate is not relying on counterattack damage. Instead, you're going to rely on using that choke the land with green to stop builds and to stop ravages. I find this this specific aspect to be, I don't like it. I wish there was a little bit more. During playtesting, I was trying to get them to shaft Gift of Proliferation with it, because I really just didn't want to see Gift of Proliferation on an aspect. And I was trying to say maybe go with. I actually told them like, hey guys, you got to give. I'll show you the candidates, the cards. I wrote a whole like talking hours of like work I put in trying to get them to change this, but they didn't listen. But let me see. The cards I asked them to do was these, Dark Entangled, and Choke Fungus. And I didn't put any like that much thought into it to where I like actually play tested it. But I was like, man, what if instead of doing Gift of Proliferation as a support card, you got Gift of Power? I mean, it's perfect element. It's insane. Or like Thriving Choke Fungus, you get the extra Badlands, Disease Synergy would be so much fun with the Spirit. Or you can do Disorienting, which I was like less keen on this card. And then Dark Entangled would be because you're losing a defensive innate with the right innate, this would give you a defensive tool that you can play. Like I really want, like this was the card I was mainly pushing for because I think it was the most reasonable. I think Thriving Choke Fungus and Gift of Power might be just too over the top, but they didn't do it. So all of those dreams just washed away. Yeah, I think Regrowth, the power level, I currently have it a little bit lower than base green, but I think I'm undervaluing it. So as I play more and more games with it, it just tends to just do really, really well. Especially into double adversaries where I think that's where it's going to thrive, is where those skips are going to matter a lot more than just a small defend 2, right? Defend 2 can defend single adversary ravages, but not going to defend against playing against like Sweden 5, France 4, or like crazy stuff like that. So this is the first aspect. Let's look at the second aspect. And we get Tangles, my favorite. Let's put it here. I love Tangles. Oh, and it already added that. That's really cool. So you're going to notice Tangles is going to do a couple things. The first thing is it's going to replace our left innate. And it's sad because I love the left innate, but it makes sense. You have this moon plant innate, and you're going to switch to a sun plant innate. So you're kind of changing the theme of the spirit. You're also going to have a huge wilds gameplay, and you're going to gain this left innate, and it says Tangles of Greenery, and it says fast power, 0 range, 1 sun, 2 plant, add a wilds. You have the second threshold, push an explorer. The third isolates the land, and the fourth downgrades the city and adds another wilds. With this innate, you're going to be adding so many wilds to the board, isolating, maneuvering explorers. It's so much fun to play, and I love how it pushes the player to want to draft a different element. Because when I'm playing base green, I'm looking for moon. Now I'm looking for sun plant, and I do play a lot of roots, so I'm keen on those sun plant cards. But like getting cards like Sear Anger, um, Enticing Splendor, so just really fun sun plant cards. Like Living Energy is great too. So really fun to play Tangles. It also gets rid of Gift of Proliferation, and I just talked about how I really wanted to get rid of that Gift of Proliferation card, and this is an aspect that does it. And it gives us belligerent and aggressive crops. It's a 1 energy slow sun fire plant card. Sacred Site 2 range from a building. Let's take a minute and appreciate how awesome this artwork is. And then it says you get to add a wilds, 1 damage to buildings, and then if there's an adjacent wilds, 1 fear and an extra damage. So ideally, you're going to place wilds with the Tangles innate, and then this just allows you to kill a town, add a wilds, and gain a fear for 1 energy. This card, there's so much value on this card. This card's a really, really good card. There's not many cards that can kill buildings. And do everything else that this card does for the cost of 1 energy. Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints. I think it's a great replacement. It's definitely not Gift of Proliferation level, but it's a very strong card. Overall, I think Tangles is a better spirit than base green when it comes to interacting with your board. Tangles is so good at beating adversaries as well as double adversaries. And I've had great success with this thing. It can do monster things. Now, it doesn't have the Gift of Proliferation, so the ceiling is a lot lower, but I have a lot of fun playing this thing. This thing is it's pretty good. It's pretty strong. But yeah, so this is probably my favorite way to play green. If I finish this guide, I think I will do the guide based off of base green, and then I might do an extra video on Tangles and then one on Regrowth. I haven't decided yet. Oh, that's another thing. So Tangles and base green basically play the same way, as in their openings and the cards you're playing, while the Regrowth aspect changes up how you're going to play because you lose that defensive tool, so you have to choose G2 more. So just something that I wanted to mention. So hopefully you guys like this video. If you do, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.